My husband planned the perfect fifth anniversary surprise weekend getaway. He booked the same hotel where we honeymooned and recreated our first date down to every detail. Then I found out he'd done the exact same romantic weekend with his secretary 3 weeks earlier. Some betrayals are brutal and obvious, like finding lipstick on a collar or walking in on your spouse with someone else. But the worst betrayals are the ones wrapped in gestures so romantic that you almost feel guilty for being suspicious. My name is Rachel Stevens. I'm 31. And this is the story of how my husband's attempt at the perfect anniversary gift revealed that our entire marriage was a carefully choreographed lie. I met David Stevens 7 years ago when I was working as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup in Austin. He was the company's new sales director, confident, charming, and devastatingly handsome in that effortless way that made other women stop talking when he walked into a room. David pursued me with a kind of romantic intensity that you see in movies but rarely experience in real life. He sent flowers to my office with handwritten notes, planned elaborate surprise dates, and seemed to remember every detail about my preferences and dreams. On our first official date, he took me to a small Italian restaurant called Bella Vista, ordered a bottle of Chianti, and we talked until the restaurant closed. He walked me home through downtown Austin, and we stopped at a food truck for late-night tacos. It was spontaneous, romantic, and perfect. This is exactly how I imagined falling in love would feel. I told my best friend Sarah the next day. Like everything just clicks into place. David proposed 18 months later during a weekend trip to the same hotel in the Hill Country where we'd gone for our 6-month anniversary. He'd arranged for the staff to scatter rose petals in our room and had champagne waiting when we arrived. "Rachel, you're the love of my life," he said, as he got down on one knee. "I want to spend forever making you as happy as you make me." Our wedding was everything I dreamed off an outdoor ceremony at a vineyard with our closest friends and family. David cried when he saw me walking down the aisle, and his vows were so heartfelt that half the guests were in tears. "Rachel makes me want to be the best version of myself," he said during the ceremony. "She sees potential in me that I didn't even know existed." The first 4 years of our marriage were blissful. David was attentive, romantic, and seemingly devoted to our relationship. He remembered important dates, surprised me with thoughtful gifts, and made me feel like the most important person in his world. He was also incredibly successful at work. David had moved to a larger tech company as a regional sales manager and was quickly promoted to VP of sales. His career success allowed us to buy a beautiful house, travel frequently, and enjoy a comfortable lifestyle. "I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished," I told him during our 4th anniversary dinner. "You work so hard to provide for us." "Everything I do is for you," he replied, taking my hand across the table. "You inspire me to achieve more than I ever thought possible." But looking back, I realized that David's romantic gestures followed very specific patterns. He had a repertoire of about 10 different perfect dates that he would cycle through on a regular basis. The Italian restaurant, followed by tacos, the Hill Country Hotel with rose petals and champagne, the surprise picnic in Zilker Park with wine and cheese from our favorite deli. At the time, I thought it was sweet that he kept recreating our special moments. I interpreted his patterns as romantic consistency, rather than what they actually were, a systematic approach to manipulation that he could easily replicate with different women. Our 5th anniversary was approaching in October, and David seemed more excited about planning the celebration than he'd been about previous anniversaries. "I want this year to be extra special," he told me in September. 5 years is a major milestone, and I want to do something that shows how much our relationship means to me. "David, you don't need to do anything elaborate. I just want to spend time with you. But you deserve something amazing. Let me surprise you." David refused to give me any details about his anniversary plans, insisting that the surprise was an essential part of the experience. "Trust me," he said, with that charming smile that had first attracted me to him. "I know exactly what will make this anniversary unforgettable." 2 weeks before our anniversary, David announced that he'd arranged for us to take a long weekend trip to recreate our honeymoon. "I booked us the same suite at the Driscoll Hotel where we stayed during our honeymoon," he said proudly. "Same room, same restaurants, same everything. We're going to relive the most romantic weekend of our lives. I was touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. The Driscoll was an elegant, historic hotel in downtown Austin where we'd spent 3 nights after our wedding. It held special significance for us as the place where we'd started our married life together. "David, that's incredibly romantic," I said, genuinely moved by his planning. "I can't wait to revisit all those memories." "It gets better," he continued. "I've made reservations at Bella Vista for Friday night, the same restaurant where we had our first date. We're going to start the weekend by going back to where it all began. You thought of everything. Saturday night, we're having dinner at Uchi, just like our honeymoon. And Sunday morning, we're doing the whole room service breakfast in bed thing that you loved so much." The more David described his plans, the more elaborate they became. He'd apparently spent weeks coordinating every detail to perfectly recreate our most romantic moments. "I even arranged for them to have the same champagne we drank on our wedding night," he said. "Dom Perignon 2010. I had to special order it because they don't normally stock that vintage." I was impressed by the level of detail and planning that David had put into our anniversary celebration. It felt like proof of how much our relationship meant to him and how carefully he treasured our shared memories. "This is going to be perfect," I told him. "I love that you want to celebrate our history together." The weekend arrived, and everything unfolded exactly as David had promised. We checked into the same suite at the Driscoll, complete with rose petals and champagne. David had even arranged for the staff to play the same music that had been playing during our honeymoon. Friday night dinner at Bella Vista was magical. David ordered the same wine we'd shared on our first date, and we sat at a corner table that felt intimately familiar. He was charming and attentive, asking about my work and sharing stories about his recent business trips. To 5 years of marriage and a lifetime of adventures ahead, he toasted as we finished dessert. Saturday's activities continued the theme of romantic recreation. We spent the day exploring downtown Austin, visiting the same shops and galleries we'd enjoyed during our honeymoon. David bought me a piece of jewelry from the same boutique where he'd purchased my wedding gift. Saturday night dinner at Uchi was exquisite. David had arranged for us to sit at the chef's counter, just like our honeymoon, and we shared an omakase tasting menu with wine pairings. "This is exactly what I needed," I told David as we walked back to the hotel. "Sometimes I forget how good we are together, when we're not caught up in work and daily stress." "That's why I wanted to do this," David replied, "to remind us both of why we fell in love and why our marriage is worth celebrating." Sunday morning's room service breakfast was the perfect ending to a perfect weekend. We stayed in bed until noon, eating strawberries and drinking champagne while planning our next adventure together. "Thank you for planning such an incredible anniversary," I said as we finally got ready to check out. "This weekend felt like falling in love with you all over again." "That was exactly what I was hoping for," David said, kissing me softly. "I want every anniversary to be a reminder of how lucky we are to have found each other." I felt closer to David than I had in months. The weekend had reminded me of all the reasons I'd fallen in love with him and reinforced my belief that we had a strong, lasting marriage. That feeling lasted exactly 3 days. On Wednesday afternoon, I was having lunch with my friend Sarah when she mentioned seeing David at Bella Vista the previous month. "He looked like he was on a really romantic date," she said casually. "The woman he was with was gorgeous long blonde hair, probably in her mid-20s. They were sitting at that corner table you guys always request." My blood went cold. When was this? Maybe 3 weeks ago? I would have said hi, but they looked so absorbed in each other that I didn't want to interrupt. What did the woman look like? Tall, blonde, very well dressed. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. Maybe someone from your work? I felt sick. 3 weeks ago would have been right around the time David was planning our anniversary weekend. And the corner table at Bella Vista was our table, the same one where we'd had our first date and our anniversary dinner. "Sarah, are you sure it was David?" "Definitely. He was wearing that blue suit you bought him for his birthday, and he had that same charming smile he gets when he's trying to impress someone." I spent the rest of lunch in a daze, trying to come up with innocent explanations for what Sarah had seen. Maybe it was a business dinner. Maybe the woman was a client or colleague. Maybe Sarah had been mistaken about the romantic atmosphere, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. That evening, I decided to casually ask David about his recent work dinners. "How have your client meetings been going lately?" I asked while we were making dinner together. "Pretty well. Lots of late nights, but the deals are worth it." "Have you been taking clients to nice restaurants?" "A few. You know how these sales guys like to be wined and dined." "Anywhere I'd recognize?" David paused for just a moment before answering. "Nothing too fancy, mostly just standard business dinner places." This was clearly a lie. Bella Vista wasn't a standard business dinner place. It was an intimate, romantic restaurant that David knew held special significance in our relationship. Over the next few days, I found myself paying closer attention to David's behavior and schedule. I noticed that he'd been working late more frequently over the past few months, often claiming to have client dinners or networking events that kept him out until 10 or 11 p.m. I also noticed that he'd been more attentive to his appearance lately, buying new clothes and spending more time on grooming. At the time, I'd attributed this to his professional success, but now I was viewing it through a different lens. The real revelation came when I was doing laundry and found a receipt in David's pants pocket. It was from the Driscoll Hotel, dated 3 weeks before our anniversary. The receipt was for a one-night stay in the same suite where we'd spent our anniversary weekend. My hands were shaking as I stared at the paper. David had taken someone else to our anniversary hotel 3 weeks before taking me there. He'd used our special place for another romantic encounter, then brought me there to recreate our honeymoon memories. I felt physically ill realizing that everything about our perfect anniversary weekend had been a lie. David hadn't been planning a romantic surprise for me. He'd been rehearsing a performance that he'd already perfected with someone else. That night, I confronted David about the hotel receipt. "David, I found this in your pants pocket," I said, showing him the Driscoll receipt. "Why were you at our anniversary hotel 3 weeks ago?" David's face went white, but he quickly composed himself. "Oh, that. I was scouting the location for our anniversary weekend. I wanted to make sure everything would be perfect, so I booked a night to check out the room and coordinate with the staff." "You spent the night there alone to scout it for our anniversary?" "I wanted to experience it from your perspective to make sure all the details would be right." This explanation was absurd. David could have coordinated with hotel staff during the day without booking an overnight stay. And the receipt clearly showed charges for room service, champagne, and other amenities that would be unnecessary for a simple venue inspection. "David, that doesn't make sense. Why would you need to spend the night there to plan our anniversary?" "Rachel, you're being paranoid. I was trying to create a perfect romantic weekend for you, and now you're turning it into something suspicious." "I'm not being paranoid. Sarah saw you at Bella Vista 3 weeks ago with another woman." David's expression shifted from defensive to angry. "Sarah saw me having a business dinner and jumped to conclusions. Just because I was eating with a female colleague doesn't mean I was having an affair." "A romantic business dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date?" "It's a good restaurant, Rachel. I'm allowed to eat there with other people. And you're allowed to take female colleagues to our anniversary hotel suite?" "I told you I was planning our anniversary. I'm sorry that my effort to surprise you is being twisted into evidence of cheating." David's responses felt rehearsed and defensive. He was attacking my concerns instead of addressing them, and his explanations didn't hold up to basic scrutiny. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the patterns in David's romantic gestures and wondering how many other women had experienced the same perfect dates that I thought were uniquely ours. The next morning, while David was at work, I decided to investigate further. I started by checking our credit card statements online. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. Over the past year, there were multiple charges at restaurants and hotels that David had claimed to have visited for business purposes. But many of these establishments were romantic venues that seemed inappropriate for client meetings. There were charges for expensive dinners at intimate restaurants, weekend hotel stays at romantic resorts, and purchases from jewelry stores and lingerie boutiques. Most damning were the duplicate charges. David had taken someone to Bella Vista 4 times in the past 6 months. He'd booked rooms at the Driscoll twice, in addition to our anniversary weekend. He'd made purchases from the same boutique where he'd bought my anniversary gift on 3 separate occasions. David wasn't just having an affair, he was running multiple relationships using the same romantic playbook that I thought was unique to our marriage. I also found charges for flowers and gifts that I'd never received. David was apparently maintaining the same level of romantic attention with other women that he showed me. The financial evidence painted a picture of systematic infidelity that had been going on for months, possibly years. I printed out the credit card statements and spent the afternoon documenting the pattern of suspicious charges. I wanted to be completely sure of my facts before confronting David again. That evening, I laid out all the evidence on our dining room table and waited for David to come home. "David, we need to talk," I said when he walked in the door. "What's all this?" he asked, looking at the papers spread across the table. "This is proof that you've been lying to me about your business dinners and client meetings." I walked him through the credit card evidence, pointing out the pattern of romantic expenses and duplicate charges at venues that held special significance in our relationship. "You've taken someone else to Bella Vista 4 times this year," I said. "You've booked rooms at the Driscoll multiple times. You've bought jewelry and gifts that I never received." David looked at the evidence for a long moment before responding. "Rachel, these are all legitimate business expenses. Just because you don't understand how sales relationships work doesn't mean I'm cheating on you. Business relationships that require lingerie purchases and overnight stays at romantic hotels. Some of these clients have specific expectations about entertainment and hospitality. It's part of closing deals. David, stop lying to me. I know what this evidence shows." "You know what you want to believe," David said, his tone becoming hostile. "You've decided I'm cheating, and now you're interpreting every expense as proof of your theory. Then explain the hotel stays. Explain the duplicate dinners at our special restaurant. Explain why you're spending thousands of dollars on romantic gestures for people who aren't your wife." David's facade finally cracked. "Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing other people, but it's not what you think. What I think is that you're a cheater who's been lying to me for months. It's more complicated than that, Rachel. These relationships are about business networking and maintaining client relationships. Sometimes that involves romantic dinners and overnight stays. Are you seriously trying to tell me that you're sleeping with clients for business purposes? I'm telling you that the line between business and personal relationships isn't always clear in sales. And yes, sometimes maintaining those relationships requires a level of intimacy that goes beyond traditional business meetings." I stared at David in disbelief. He was admitting to having affairs while trying to frame them as legitimate business practices. "David, that's prostitution. You're describing prostitution. I'm describing relationship building in a competitive industry where personal connections determine success. By sleeping with clients, by doing whatever it takes to close deals and support our lifestyle." The conversation continued for hours, with David alternately denying the affairs, minimizing their significance, and justifying them as business necessities. What became clear was that David had been living a double life for years, using our marriage as his home base while maintaining multiple romantic relationships with women he met through work. The most painful revelation was that our entire relationship had been built on a foundation of manipulation and lies. The romantic gestures I'd treasured as evidence of David's love were actually just tactics from his playbook that he used with multiple women. Our perfect anniversary weekend hadn't been a celebration of our marriage, it had been David's attempt to maintain the illusion of devotion while continuing his affairs with other women. "How many women?" I asked finally. "Rachel, that's not important. How many women have you taken to our special places? How many women have received the same romantic treatment that I thought was unique to our relationship?" David was quiet for a long moment. "It doesn't matter how many. What matters is that you're my wife, and our marriage is what's important to me. If our marriage was important to you, you wouldn't be cheating on me with multiple women. I never stopped loving you, Rachel. These other relationships were just business. Business relationships don't involve recreating our honeymoon with other women." David had no response to that. The following weeks were a blur of lawyers, financial investigations, and the painful process of untangling a marriage built on lies. But I wasn't content to simply divorce David and move on. I wanted him to experience the same humiliation and betrayal that he'd inflicted on me. Through David's phone records and credit card statements, I identified several women he'd been seeing regularly. There was Jessica, his 26-year-old secretary, who'd been receiving the same romantic treatment for over a year. There was Amanda, a client from Dallas, who'd been flying to Austin monthly for business meetings that included overnight stays at luxury hotels. And there was Brittany, a marketing consultant who apparently thought she was David's serious girlfriend. I started with Jessica. I called her office and asked to speak with her privately about an urgent matter concerning David Stevens. "This is regarding David's wife," I said when she came to the phone. "I think we need to have a conversation." Jessica agreed to meet me for coffee that afternoon, probably thinking I was going to demand she stay away from my husband. Instead, I brought printed copies of David's credit card statements and a detailed timeline of his romantic activities. "Jessica, David has been telling you that his marriage is over, and he's planning to leave me, hasn't he?" I said as we sat down at Starbucks. Jessica looked uncomfortable but nodded. "He said you two have been having problems for years, and that he's been trying to find the right time to file for divorce. And he's probably told you that you're the only woman he's ever loved like this?" "Yes. How did you know that?" I spread the credit card statements across the table, because he said the exact same things to at least 3 other women while taking them to the exact same restaurants and hotels where he takes you. Jessica's face went white as she looked at the evidence. I walked her through David's pattern of duplicate romantic gestures, showing her that the special dates she'd shared with David were identical to experiences he'd given to other women. "He took you to Bella Vista for your first romantic dinner, didn't he?" "Yes." "How did you?" "Because he takes all his women there. It's part of his standard romantic routine. Same restaurant, same wine, probably even the same conversation topics." I showed Jessica the multiple charges at Bella Vista, the Driscoll Hotel, and other locations she'd visited with David. "He's been seeing Amanda from Dallas for 8 months, I continued. "He's been telling her the same lies about our marriage and making the same promises about your future together." Jessica stared at the papers in shock. "I don't understand. David said I was the only one." "David is a serial cheater who uses the same romantic playbook with multiple women. He's not planning to leave me for you, Jessica. He's planning to keep you as a side relationship while maintaining our marriage and pursuing other women." I pulled out my phone and showed Jessica photos from our anniversary weekend, the same hotel, the same restaurants, the same romantic gestures that David had shared with her just weeks earlier. "This was our 5th anniversary celebration," I explained. "David recreated our honeymoon weekend down to every detail, but he practiced it first with you and probably with other women." Jessica started crying as the reality of David's deception sank in. "I thought he loved me," she sobbed. "I thought we had something real." "You did have something real. You had a real relationship with a real person who really cared about you. But that person wasn't David. David is an actor playing a role." Jessica quit her job the next day and moved back to her hometown in Oklahoma. But before she left, she agreed to help me contact the other women in David's rotation. Amanda was devastated when I showed her the evidence of David's multiple relationships. She'd been planning to relocate to Austin to be closer to him and had already given notice at her job in Dallas. Brittany was the hardest to convince because she was the most emotionally invested. David had been telling her that he was separated from me and living in a temporary apartment while the divorce was finalized. "He's been staying at my place 3 nights a week for the past 6 months," she argued when I showed her the evidence. "Brittany, look at these credit card statements. David charged hotel rooms on the same nights he was supposedly staying at your apartment. He was juggling multiple women and telling each of you different stories." I also showed Brittany photos from our anniversary weekend and our normal life together. "This is David's real life," I said, showing her pictures of our house, our shared bank accounts, and our joint social media presence. He's not separated, he's not getting divorced, and he's not living in a temporary apartment." Brittany was furious when she realized the extent of David's deception. Once I'd contacted all of David's women and shown them the evidence of his systematic deception, I moved on to the next phase of my plan. I decided to expose David's behavior to his professional network. David's success in sales was partly based on his reputation as a trustworthy, family-oriented man. His affairs weren't just personal betrayals, they were professional fraud, since he'd been using company resources and time to maintain his multiple relationships. I compiled a detailed report documenting David's misuse of company credit cards, his lies about business travel and client meetings, and his practice of conducting personal relationships during work hours. I sent this report to David's boss, his HR department, and several key clients who'd been unknowingly funding his romantic activities through their business relationships with his company. The professional consequences were swift and severe. David was fired within a week of my report reaching his supervisors. His company conducted an internal investigation and discovered that he'd been falsifying expense reports and using company resources for personal purposes for over 2 years. Several clients canceled their contracts when they learned that their business relationship with David had been used as cover for his affairs with other women. David's professional reputation was destroyed overnight. Word spread quickly through Austin's business community that he was unethical and unreliable. I also decided to expose David's behavior to our social circle and family members who'd been unknowingly providing alibis and cover stories. I hosted a gathering at our house and invited all of our mutual friends, along with David's family members. I presented the same evidence I'd shown to his women and his employers. David told me he was having dinner with you last Thursday, I said to his brother, Mike. But he was actually at a hotel with another woman. He used your name as an alibi. One by one, I showed our friends and family how David had lied to them and used their relationships as cover for his infidelity. The social consequences were devastating for David. Friends who trusted him felt betrayed and manipulated. His reputation in our community was completely destroyed. But the most satisfying part of my revenge was the financial investigation that followed during our divorce proceedings. My attorney discovered that David had been hiding significant assets and income through his various affairs and business relationships. He'd been receiving expensive gifts from the women he was seeing and using his relationships with female clients to secure business deals that included personal kickbacks. The court ordered him to pay me significant additional spousal support and asset division as compensation for his financial deception. The final blow came when Jessica, Amanda, and Brittany decided to file a civil lawsuit against David for emotional distress and fraud. They argued that David had conducted intentional emotional manipulation campaigns designed to extract money, gifts, and personal benefits through false promises of love and commitment. David was ordered to pay damages to all 3 women and was permanently barred from contacting them. The lawsuit also generated significant media attention in Austin's business community. David's name became synonymous with romantic and professional deception. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I ran into David at a grocery store. He looked terribly, he'd gained weight, his clothes were wrinkled, and he had the defeated appearance of someone whose life had completely fallen apart. "Rachel," he said when he saw me, "can we talk?" "We don't have anything to talk about, David. I know you hate me, but what you did was excessive. You destroyed my entire life over a few mistakes." "A few mistakes? David, you conducted systematic fraud and emotional manipulation for years. You used our marriage as cover for a network of affairs that involved professional misconduct and financial deception. I never meant to hurt you. I loved you." "No, you didn't love me. You loved the stability and respectability that marriage provided while you pursued other women." David looked like he wanted to continue the conversation, but I walked away. I later learned that David had moved to Houston and was working in a low-level sales position at a company that didn't do background checks. His professional reputation was so damaged that he couldn't find employment in Austin. He'd also been unable to maintain any serious romantic relationships because his behavior had become public knowledge in his social circles. As for me, I used my experience with David's deception to help other women recognize and escape similar situations. I started a blog about financial and emotional fraud in relationships, sharing the warning signs I'd learned to identify and the resources available to victims of romantic manipulation. I also volunteer with legal aid organizations that help women document and pursue financial claims against partners who've committed romantic fraud. The experience taught me that love without integrity is just manipulation, and that romantic gestures without genuine emotion are just performance art designed to extract benefits from victims. David thought he was a master manipulator who could maintain multiple relationships indefinitely by recycling the same romantic experiences and promises. But his systematic approach to deception was also his weakness. Once I understood his patterns, I was able to document his behavior and expose it to all of his victims simultaneously. David's downfall wasn't caused by his infidelity. It was caused by his arrogance and his belief that he was smarter than the women he was manipulating. In the end, David's romantic fraud scheme collapsed because he made the mistake of targeting women who were strong enough to fight back when they learned the truth. Jessica, Amanda, Brittany, and I all survived David's manipulation and went on to build better lives without him. David, on the other hand, is still dealing with the consequences of his choices and will likely never recover the reputation and opportunities he lost through his own greed and selfishness. Sometimes the best revenge is simply allowing someone to experience the natural consequences of their own behavior. The most important lesson I learned is that trust, once broken, reveals everything. When I stopped believing David's lies and started investigating his behavior, the entire foundation of our relationship crumbled because it had never been real in the first place. Real love doesn't require deception, manipulation, or the exploitation of multiple people to maintain. David never learned that lesson, which is why he's still alone, while the women he tried to manipulate have all moved on to healthier, more honest relationships.